Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi spoke today with President Trump at his request.
China has deployed scores of naval vessels across East Asian waters in its largest ever maritime show of force as a diplomatic spat with Japan over Taiwan thickens.
Australian ships, Australian planes are constantly buzzing around the Chinese waters. They're just outside of China's waters. They're going through the Taiwan Strait because the Taiwan Strait is a body of water that belongs to China. There are ships, many Chinese ships, conducting freedom of navigation exercises now in two different areas. One is around Japan. They have literally surrounded Japan in international waters and said, let's look what we can do.
那我们跟以色列过去因为中国的因素比较不能够有这么样的比较紧密的关系。那这个是站在台湾跟以色列，只要符合双边的利益，我们应该把这个空间能够找出来。
Almost every country in the world and the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice all believe that Israel is involved in a genocide. Why would Taiwan want to align themselves with a country that the rest of the world, almost all the rest of the world, agrees is involved in genocide?
Hundreds of protesters gathered outside Camp Schwab in Okinawa, turning the gates of the U.S. Marine Corps base into a stage of defiance. To prevent the construction of a new base at Henoko, drew residents carrying banners reading, "Close all bases."
There are permanent vigil outside of each of these bases. Every military personnel coming in or going out must go past a protest. They see the protest. They know they're not wanted there.
So logic says that China will not attack, but leaders do not always operate on logic. There's always the possibility of conflict breaking out. If that happens, my question is, what role do you see India playing there?
I think that India in that event would provide indirect support for the United States. I don't think that India would get involved in the fighting.
What you have there is an Indian media hostess. She is extremely anti-China. She's a hawk. She's a sensationalist, and she's doing this for clicks. John Mersheimer is a realist.
A popular social media platform used by millions in Taiwan now has been placed off limits. The restriction on RedNote has sparked questions about where the line now stands between digital security and information control.
It's about controlling what you see and what you can't see. RedNote can't be banned in Taiwan. It's been banned for 12 months. And the idea, they're saying it's a national security risk, it's got some fraud issues.
On Saturday, September 27th, the former British parliamentarian George Galloway was stopped and detained by armed counter-terrorism police at London's Gatwick Airport. Mr. Galloway was returning with his wife Gayatri on a flight from Dubai when officers stopped him under Schedule 3 of the Counter-Terrorism and Border Security Act, asking them about their views on China and Russia and grilling them as to why they supported Palestine.
George Galloway was arrested. He says he wasn't arrested, he was just detained. How can that be? That goes against the very fundaments of British law. And America basically has the same law as Britain in terms of human rights. Now, what's happened is that the government has given the police these special powers that allow them to do things that the Magna Carta, which is a nearly 1,000-year-old document, says can't do. This is a document that has stood the test of time. It was signed, I think, in 1215, and it was the right of habeas corpus. It gave you human rights.
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
I am very well, thank you.
Good that you fixed your mic issue, I guess. We tried to record it last 4 times and were unsuccessful.
It wasn't that difficult to fix. I thought I'd fixed it the first time. I'm sorry, but yeah, I got the new headphones, and they're not gaming. I've got a set of gaming headphones which no longer work, but they don't have flashing lights. My other ones, the ones I was wearing the other day, these ones have flashing lights, right, for gamers, and they've broken down too. So yeah, it's fixed. It cost me 28 RMB, which is a little over $5, a little less than $6 Australian, and about I don't know, $4 in the US to get these, and they work. Yeah.
As long as they last for like 6 months, it's $5 paid well. I guess
I call them disposable. My wife said, "Why didn't you get better ones?" Well, these work.
Yeah,
get another pair next month.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're gonna last more than 2, as long as they don't explode. Like we were talking last time. Most of the equipment has been manipulated. So
yeah, made in Israel.
Made in Israel, and then yeah. So games. Do you still play games?
No, I've never played games.
Right.
I'm not a gamer.
Right.
I don't even know how to open games, let alone play them. No, I don't play games. Look at me, I'm too old, too serious for that.
Right, that's okay. Did you play chess?
No, I mean, I know how to, but I've never really been a chess player. I'm, I think I'm a little bit ADD, to be honest. I never, with the exception of working on my computer and doing what I do, the social media stuff, I very rarely sit in the same place for more than 20 minutes or so. I'm always doing something. But then I found myself that because the work that I do on here is so engrossing, I get stuck into this. So this is I've got ADD, I guess, or hyperactivity of some sort. But then I get into something like this, and sometimes I get 500 comments in a day, and I read them all. I reply to maybe 100 of them, or maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but I reply to a fair percentage of them, and that's all just me doing that. So it's 4 or 5 hours a day of sitting in this seat, and then I have you'll see me as well. I occasionally when we're talking, I have to go like this. I can't sit still for very long. I have to keep moving, but it's not restlessness. It's just the way I am. So playing games, playing chess, things like that. Monopoly, I could never stand Monopoly as a kid. I'm dyslexic, so I can't play Scrabble. So lots of problems like that. But yeah, generally speaking, I never sit still for more than a few minutes, unless I'm on my bike or sitting here.
Okay, I'll start off with sharing something with you, which I found really interesting. I think we sort of talked about it last time, but I found another video. Let me know when you see the screen.
Yep, the screen is there.
那我们跟以色列过去因为中国的因素，比较不能够有这么样的比较紧密的关系。那这个是站在台湾跟以色列，只要符合双边的利益，我们应该把这个空间能够找出来。我要再次就说感谢以色列在120个国会议员。
So there was Taiwanese foreign minister, and I've got another one, which is even more. I mean, this wasn't sensational at all, but this one is pretty sensational. I'm guessing they're in the business of news making, so.
I actually think that was quite sensational. I'll explain why when we come back to it.
So. Let me know when you see the screen.
I see it.
Taiwan and Israel are standing on the front line to defend the expansion of authoritarian regime, the expansion of totalism, and also the terrorism. When those axes of upheavals, Russia, Iran, China, North Korea, are increasing its alignment.
Is China, communist China, the most dangerous nation on the planet?
So, is China the most dangerous nation on the planet?
Well, he posed it as a question. There is the answer. No.
Oh, I forgot to show you. Hang on. I mean, this is very interesting. You keep talking. I'm listening to you, but I wanna.
Yeah. So he posed it as a question, and the answer is clearly no. It's not the most dangerous. It's not even the most dangerous country in China. It's a very, very peaceful nation. I don't know what his danger comes from, but it's in his head.
But the funny thing is, if you look at the comments. Can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
The U.S. and Israel regime are the true bloodthirsty empire. U.S. and Israel are the most dangerous. My common sense is that they are leaders. All lives matter, not just of certain, choosing to get advantage. U.S. and here are the global shit. So there you go.
It's stirrers. Yeah. When you see those comments, you realize that people are not as blind or as dumb as those hosts think their audience are. I don't know how many people would watch them. See, this is the opposite to me. I get 99% positivity because people who watch me understand that I'm I tell the truth. I can make mistakes and have people who say, no, I disagree with that. But, they generally agree in principle, but might disagree with a certain aspect of it because we all have different experience, and different experience leads to different opinions. And so, we might have people, particularly on something like I put out a few days ago, where is China socialist or capitalist? And of course, the answer is it's both. But a lot of people say, well, it's much more socialist than we think it is. And a lot of people say, no, it's much more capitalist. And it depends on what industry you're in, what experience you have, where you live, and what you do and what you know. So those are differences of opinions. But then you get those people like this who make a TV show or make a living out of disparaging China. And I would have thought that the audience they would attract would be 99% positive for them. But there are several anti-China vloggers. I won't mention any names. Your audience will probably know exactly who I mean. They used to live in China. They no longer live in China. And they spend their lives pretending they're still in China and how experienced they are about China. But the people I know, none of them have lived here for the last 8 years, some of them even longer since then. And some of them haven't even been back for a visit. They're afraid to come back for a visit because they think they'll get arrested, whereas I believe they would not. They may get a visa rejected, but I don't think they would be allowed in and then arrested, which does happen to foreigners who go to Australia, who go to America. The Julian Assange example, they will let you in and then they'll arrest you. David McBride in Australia, he's a whistleblower. He was living in Spain for his own safety. He went back to see his daughter either graduate or take part in some activity. He went back to visit his daughter and was arrested on the way out of Australia. He's the only, believe it or not, he's the only person who has been convicted and is in prison. He's the only person who's even been charged, I believe, because he was the whistleblower on all the murders that took place by the military in Afghanistan. So he blew the whistle on that and is the only person punished so far. And the Australian army have been out of Afghanistan for several years. No one's been punished for what we know are murders. We know, we don't believe, we don't suspect. Murders took place. This has been proven in a civil court, but it hasn't been proven in a criminal court yet. And the only person in prison is that guy. So, those people can come to China. Now, we got a little off topic there, but the fact is that they have an audience of people who love to hear all this negativity about China, and their comment section is absolutely full. I don't bother watching them. I know they're lying. Someone might send me a clip or a comment or some context, and I will just say, nah, that's rubbish. I don't even refute them most of the time. I let them go because their audience wants this. This is a group of people, and they have huge audiences. There's one I know has more than 1.5 million viewers, 1.5 million subscribers, and they are constantly just telling lies about China. They're telling lies about their own position. On X, this guy says, I'm in Shenzhen. He hasn't been in Shenzhen for at least 8 years. So, you get that. And those two audiences are very different. Mine are very different. But I do get people coming to my channel, and they make these comments. And once you make these comments and tell me that I'm a liar, I'm paid by the CCP, all these kinds of comments, I just say, well, can you prove that? If you can prove that, great, you get some credibility. If you can't, your name calling in the schoolyard, it's not going to do you any good at all. I don't bother arguing with them. Sometimes if someone asks me a question or makes a point that is something different, I'll actually reply them with quite a lengthy reply and then turn it into a script to make a video for the next time. This is what someone said to me. And so that way it kind of inspires me to do better than them. But that guy talking about, is China a dangerous threat or the most dangerous country in the world? The answer is simple. When did China attack anyone? Now, Ali, I don't know how old you are, but the last time China attacked anyone, you weren't born. And it lasted 3 weeks. They invaded and did not occupy. They invaded for 3 weeks and came out. It was a border issue. It was related to Cambodia and Vietnam, and they went into Vietnam, had a 3-week conflict, which was quite bloody and quite difficult, and then they came out. And once they came out, then they started to repair relations, and the relations between Vietnam and China are now at a diplomatic and governmental level very, very good. At a person-to-person level, there are people in both countries who dislike the other country, but they're doing okay. China's never invaded anyone else. It's never occupied anyone else. And then people jump on the bandwagon here and say, but what about Xinjiang and what about Tibet? Historically, both parts of China. And the one part of Tibet, which we talked about before, which is China could and should invade, has actually had border skirmishes on, and then pulled back to the lines of demarcation and said, we need to sort this out diplomatically. And they do. They're working with India now for parts of Tibet that used to belong to Tibet when Tibet was not an independent country, but a protectorate of China. So Tibet's never been an independent country. Xinjiang's never been an independent country. There's no such place as East Turkestan. It appeared on a map in the early 1900s because Russia wanted to take that part of China away in the same way that they took Mongolia away. And China, I mean, they had their little battles about it, border skirmishes. They had some conflict, but eventually these are all resolved. So there's no issues now. China is not a dangerous country. End of story. Now, why is it controversial that Israel and Taiwan are working together? Because every country, almost every country in the world, and the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice all believe that Israel is involved in a genocide. Why would Taiwan want to align themselves with a country that the rest of the world, almost all the rest of the world, agrees is involved in a genocide? And why? That's pretty controversial.
I think, and we're going to talk about Tibet. Like last time, you were mentioning that Dalai Lama was on some Chinese Congress or something like that. So we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
I will show you one more thing.
I saw this, yeah.
Yeah, so we talked about this, and had a meeting with APAC, I think on 27th October. And then they are proposing to buy the T-Dome defense system from Israel. I'm not sure how good that will be, because we've seen Iran was able to penetrate their so-called Iron Dome with very little effort, I guess. So I'm not sure whether T-Dome can withstand Chinese military campaign, but obviously peace is always the best way forward. But then obviously he shared a tweet as well. This is the first time APAC's entered Taiwan, and there will be even more negotiations. And then this other thing.
What does APAC actually mean? I think it's the
American Israel Public Association Commission or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an American fund raiser or fund giver. It's when in politics
they word it differently. I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it had a different name, I think, before 1970s or 1980s, but now, I mean, obviously, their counter argument to not registering as a foreign lobby is because most of the money or all of the money is raised by the Jewish people who are well-wishers of Israel, who are living in America. But all the aid to Israel goes from America anyway. I mean, why is there no Australian American committee or UK American committee? All the foreign committees have to register in foreign lobbies. That's my understanding, except for this one. But obviously, I mean, they've got their own politics and policies. But this one also, we talked about it last time, which I found really interesting. They're banning Chinese electric vehicles, especially BYD, on the suspicion that there will be spyware in most of these Chinese vehicles. So, which I found really interesting, given the fact that we know Israel has bugged most of telecommunication equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the former leaders of Mossad was recorded recently saying something along the lines of, "Do you know how many products have been manipulated by us?" And it's a lot. Pretty much everything out there can be manipulated by the Israelis. That's why we made the joke about my headset earlier
Yeah.
on. Yeah, the real issue that I have there, APAC exists and it funds America, and I really don't care what happens in America. But what then happens is that elected officials are more likely to do, and this Princeton University did a survey on this a few years ago, did an academic report. It wasn't just a survey, it was a PhD study, and basically said America does not have any democracy anymore. There is no representation. It has a process of democracy which provides no outcomes for the people. And 97%, I think it was, of all the decisions that are made by Congress and the Senate, and even the president, 97, I think, was the percentage of all of them, which have no benefit to the people of America. Well, the more that you get like that, when you're getting up to 97%, it's basically for the donors. Then you've got to start looking at who are the donors. And the big donors, not me. If I was an American, the last thing I would be doing is donating to a political party. I mean, I would hate both political parties with a passion equally. And I'd be if you could be this, I'd be an independent. I know you can be a registered independent, but I would not be voting for either of the parties. The same would happen in Australia and the same in the UK. I did in the past vote when I was living in those countries, and I had my party affiliations, but they were based on my knowledge, my experiences of the time, and I wouldn't vote for either of them now, today. But if I was a corporation, the biggest donors to these people who are making decisions supposedly for the benefit of the people who elected them, the biggest donors are APEC and the National Rifle Association, the tobacco lobby, the farmer lobby. These are not making decisions that benefit people. They're making decisions that benefit their donors, and their donors are making decisions that benefit their elected officials. Now, bought and paid for Congress. The American democracy system, there's a joke, it's the best system money can buy. That's exactly what it is. You're buying into a system, and the richer you are, the more power you have. And the really worrying aspect of it now is it's no longer the big pharma, the big tobacco, it's no longer the guns, and it's no longer even APEC, it's the technology companies. And they are going to take over, I believe, they're going to take over the running of the country. And you might have people in positions, but those people are only in those positions. And J.D. Vance is a perfect example of this. Palantir put him in. They paid $100 million. This is not a speculation. This is a fact. They paid $100 million into the campaign funds in order to choose who they wanted as their vice president. Now, if something happens to Donald Trump, the man who takes that position is bought and paid for by the technology companies, or one in particular, Palantir, which is very frightening because that guy who runs it, Karp, is even worse than me in ADHD. He's a very frightening guy, very frightening, as is Peter Thiel. These guys are, you don't get to be billionaires, multi-billionaires, until such time as you have pretty much proven that you are a very strange person. Normal people in society don't get this. This is the uniques. They are the unicorns, the Elon Musks and the Bill Gates and all of these guys. These are unicorns. They're very, very rare, and they are special people who have special skills, talents, experiences, but they're all of them out to look after themselves, not society. And that's where elected officials in China very much differ, because they are not allowed to accept donations. They're not allowed to accept payment. They're all volunteers. Now, the government is run by a different group. This is people who work inside the government, and they work their way up through merit, through experience, through knowledge, through success, to get promoted to the next stage and the next stage. And Xi Jinping is a perfect example of this. although he does come from what the West would like to call Chinese royalty. He is a prince. His father was the head of the Yan'an Soviet. His father went on to found the special economic zone of Shenzhen, and the SEZs or SEZs were his idea, and he was the mayor of Shenzhen. This is Xi Jinping's father, so he was a pretty important guy in his own right. But Xi Jinping has worked his way up from the very bottom during the Cultural Revolution, digging ditches in villages, all the way through, and he gave up a very, very good life. Voluntarily gave up a very, very good life in the government in order to go back to college and to study so he could become part of the government. And so he's a highly qualified, highly experienced, highly successful leader who has been promoted. And everyone in the West says he came from nowhere and he's a nobody and he's ruthless and blah, blah, blah. He's not. He's extremely popular in China. Extremely popular. I would say better than 95%. I've never met a person who dislikes him. A lot of people would say he's a bit soft. He should take Taiwan. He should handle the Americans better. He's a bit too soft. That's the criticisms that he gets.
I think there's a very good book by Yanis Varoufakis, the Greece foreign minister, on technofeudalism. And another good book, I forgot the complete name of the author, Suzanne something, The Age of Surveillance. So they've talked about this quite extensively. It's not just Palantir, it's Microsoft which stores. So Microsoft is a funny one because, I mean, we know whenever there's a colonial or imperial campaign, businesses will be set up around that to support the power to be, or the power that is, to gain more resource extraction. So that's what happened when East India or Dutch India Company came to India. And then the British government got involved after that. That's what happened in Germany as well. Dell Company, Volkswagen, all these companies were making equipment for Germans. Now Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Palantir. So Microsoft is funny because it stores all the call record data of all the Palestinians in and outside of Palestine. So if a Palestinian is living in Australia, if he's going to call someone in Gaza or West Bank, that call will be recorded in a Microsoft data bank or data server. And using AI, the call will be translated and a summary will be generated and a threat level will be created. I mean, all the telecommunication equipment in Gaza and West Bank is already issued by under the supervision of Israel anyway, so they know who's making a call, who's texting what to whom. But when these big corporations get involved, it becomes slightly more concerning because everything is being monitored. And then when Palantir comes in on top of that, using their so-called data monitoring technology and data sorting technology to rate the threat level and give the geolocation of the person, whether he's in Australia, America, UK, wherever, and within Gaza and West Bank as well, then you can go and easily assassinate that person as well, which is what's been happening, I mean, anyway, which is why some people are really concerned about the overarching impact of these technologies. But there's no easy way out because these are all monopolies, and so unless you break them, you can't do anything. So
that is the problem. Even much as I dislike it, I have no choice, and I do get criticism for this occasionally, where people say, "But there you are on YouTube." Okay, yeah, it's true. I have to be on YouTube because of that monopoly. And I know there are others. There's Rumble and there's a couple of others. But you can get onto those and you would not get the market. You wouldn't get the audience. You wouldn't get the viewers. You get it. It's as simple as that. We don't have a choice to use. And then by using, we are then contained. We're corralled into where they want us to be. I've actually watched, I've seen on some of my videos, where the viewer count has gone down overnight, how many views I've had. Now, I can accept that the likes could go down. Someone can like and then say, no, I don't like it. And that could go up or down. I could accept that. very rare, but I could accept it. What I can't accept is how once someone has viewed it, and then the next day I look at it, it's got less views than yesterday. And how is that possible to unview it? You can't unsee something. And I also have a lot of people who are unsubscribed from me. They once subscribed, now they're not, and they tell me this. I get messages from people all the time saying, "I don't know why, but I was unsubscribed from you." They didn't do it. YouTube did it. So this is how they're kind of suppressing. Now, maybe that's why I only have 54,000 followers, and why this guy who pretends that he's in China has got 1.5 million, because my followers are being subscribed to him. I don't know. Could be I could have 1.5 million, or could have had 1.5 million. I get up some mornings and I find I'm 3, 4, or 5 followers less than the night before. Okay, that might happen when I put out a video that someone doesn't like, but someone's unsubscribing from me. That's not normally the case. You know, you don't watch a video and go, "Oh, I'll unsubscribe." You watch a video and say, "I'll subscribe." And if you're already subscribed, how many people actually unsubscribe from someone? It's quite rare, but it's happening to me every single day, every day. So I think I'm being suppressed, and that's why they want the monopoly, so they can contain us. They corral us into a field where they're happy with us. They give us, this voice and say, "Oh, look, we have this freedom of speech. We have this the rights and the abilities to dissent." But it's going to be pretty much controlled.
Yeah,
and it's going to get worse. Much worse.
Oh yeah, that's the thing. It's going to get worse. And Yanis Varoufakis was asked the same question. Why does he go on YouTube and give interviews to people who then post it on YouTube? Said that he has no choice. There's no alternative platform. So the question was posed not in a menacingly way, in a more thought-provoking way. Then why are you or people like him using the same platforms? So the problem is there is no other alternative.
There are alternatives in China. I mean, literally, I had a video a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, about Japan, and it got 50, 60,000 views, something like that, which is great for me to get that many views. But what happened was somebody in China has taken a section of my video, they've moved in really close to remove my logo, and then they've just kept my head and shoulders there and put subtitles, Chinese subtitles on it, and then released it on Chinese media. It has gone viral. It not only went viral on Chinese media, I have saw several of myself on Twitter, where different people had taken this thing from it's X, sorry, not Twitter, have taken this thing from Toutiao, Weibo, Bilibili. It's on all of the platforms. Literally, this went viral on Chinese media, but on Western media, I got 50,000 views. Now, for me, 50,000 is very, very good. I get 10,000, 12,000 views, I'm pretty happy. To get 50,000, I'm ecstatic. It's quite rare. But this thing has been seen by at least 1 million people in China. Now, that's pretty impressive when that happens. So there are alternatives, except that the alternatives are Chinese. And currently, my audience, I don't really need the Chinese people to see what I have to say, because they know, they already understand. And this particular story was about the bad neighbor doing a bad thing. It was an analogy that my wife gave me, and almost every comment, and there were literally thousands and thousands of comments that my wife's scrolling through them saying, all positive, all positive, all positive. I don't read Chinese, I don't read or write Chinese, but she's reading through these and she's saying, yeah, you're 100% positive. And it wasn't my story, it was her story. I just relayed it. But yeah, they picked up on this particular story and said, this guy really understands China. I don't, I understand my wife. But it worked. It got me quite widely recognized in China, not to the point where people say, oh, that's that guy. I've had a couple like that. There's a lot of people know who I am inside of China. Most of the media know who I am, and I get a lot of calls asking for comments from media. So I know people now. I know a lot of people in media because of these kinds of events.
So the views going down, it could be YouTube's own algorithms checking whether any bots have watched your video, and whoever they think is a bot, they would remove the views. I think that's how they do it. and some of them could be intentional as well, I guess. But to check, like we were discussing before recording, you can start making videos on a different channel on crimes, those crime videos, and see how well you do over there. And I'm sure those videos will do very well because they have a mass appeal. So you'll find out whether you've been suppressed or not. Also, geolocation matters because you're posting it from outside of America. So geolocation matters as well, I guess. But I heard a couple of days ago, Taiwan has banned RedNote app. I'm not sure what RedNote app is, but I think it's a Chinese app. So there's
Xiaohongshu. It's extreme. It became extremely famous in what they called the RedNote phenomenon or the TikTok phenomenon about 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, when the TikTok ban. Now, there's another thing we could talk about if you wanted to. TikTok is not a ban. It's not a TikTok ban. It's a law that allows the president of the United States to say, I don't approve of this. It's a threat to national security. Any channel can now be banned under that TikTok ban law. It's not a TikTok ban law. Now, that's a very authoritarian law that they've written because now you have one individual, the president, who can declare something a national threat. And once it's declared a national threat, it can be removed. Now, when they were threatening, and they had like 90 days before this was going to happen, and TikTok, and it still hasn't happened, by the way, it still hasn't happened, and nor has the sale that was announced. It's been done months ago. It still hasn't been sold. TikTok still belongs to Douyin and has not been sold yet. So all this rubbish that we're seeing and hearing about TikTok is not really about TikTok at all. It's about controlling your space. It's about controlling what you see and what you can't see. RedNote can't be banned in Taiwan. It's been banned for 12 months. And the idea, they're saying it's a national security risk. It's got some fraud issues. Now, they've recorded, I think it was 170 cases of fraud on RedNote. There's always going to be fraud. Anywhere you go, there's going to be fraud. It happens in China, it happens elsewhere, it happens everywhere in the world. There's going to be fraud. In fact, in China, online fraud is the only crime that's rising, the only one. And even that's under control now because they've arrested the people who do the most of it from Cambodia and Myanmar. They've arrested a lot of people related to that. But let's move to this Xiaohongshu, which is also called RedNote in the West, Little Red Book, which, of course, Little Red Book has connotations of Chairman Mao, so they don't want to call it Little Red Book, which is its proper name. Xiaohongshu literally means Little Red Book. And so they've taken this and they've banned it. And they've banned it because it's not all that powerful as yet. They also know that TikTok is very well controlled now. It's stored in the USA. It's controlled by the USA, but it's still owned by Douyin. I tried to put a video on TikTok the other day and it wouldn't let me. It didn't give me any reasons. I tried 3 or 4 times. It stopped 27% of the loading. It just went loading straight up to 27% and then stopped. And it was about the fire. And I realized that about a quarter of the way through the video, there was a live video that I'd edited in of the fire. So I don't have time at the moment, but if I had time, I'd go in and take that fire out and then reload it and see if that happened. If I just took that little clip of the fire and then reloaded it, it would probably work. So TikTok is very highly and very heavily censored, so they don't need to worry too much about that. But Xiaohongshu has absolutely no control in America. It will. I'm fairly certain they're going to announce it sometime in the future that Xiaohongshu is a danger to national security, and therefore it will fall under this category of all apps, all channels, all web pages can be seen and banned. Now, this is the most authoritarian part of it, and I read this law. Once it has been banned, anyone who goes on a VPN to see it will be breaking the law and can go to prison, and the VPN that allows it will be punished with fines of $10 million for every event. So if I go on there and I watch 10 videos in a row, there's $100 million fines. So it really is quite authoritarian. And it's not China that's done this. It's just America that's done this. And Taiwan has now said, this is a threat to our national security, so we're going to ban it. Of course, it's not a threat at all.
I think it's the same as when the governments pushed PayPal to ban transactions for certain people in Canada and in America. And VPNs are, I mean, obviously most of them are controlled by the tech people, and they have affiliations with Israel. And the TikTok ban is very real, because I was watching videos on YouTube where people were saying that they used to post on TikTok freely before, but recently they have been unable to post, or they're getting strikes when they talk about AIPAC and Israel lobby, or when they talk about American politicians preferring Israel over America. Because I've never seen a country where politicians of a country pledge allegiance to a different country and keep its own people below the people of another country. That's never happened in history, I guess. So that's all very surreal. I mean, the politicians who openly say that their loyalty to Israel is way more than their loyalty to America. And there are a couple of new videos that have come out as well, which have made some MAGA people really angry. But yeah, so these VPN bans, these PayPal bans are very real. PayPal bans are very real. RedNote is real. But again,
well, you know who started PayPal?
I know Peter Thiel.
PayPal was the Peter
Thiel
Thiel and Elon Musk.
Elon Musk took the credit. He didn't. I mean, he's very good at taking credit and taking things forward. But yeah, he actually didn't start PayPal. But yeah, I can understand why they would say PayPal started by Elon Musk. Peter Thiel obviously was the funder. So yeah, there is no easy way out right now, which is why we were talking about last time. There are two ecosystems building now, one in China and one in the West. One in the West is Google, Microsoft, Apple, Palantir, PayPal, all these kind of things. And the one in China is being used by Chinese people. It's only being used by Chinese people. It cannot be used in Australia, I guess. So once you are in that ecosystem, everything is monitored, and everything will be monitored. And do you know Professor Richard Falk? 95-year-old. He's a Holocaust survivor. He's a United Nations rapporteur. He's got like 40 books to his name. Very, very brilliant intellectual. He was detained at the Canadian border because he was considered a security and a terror threat, a 95-year-old person. That was 3 weeks ago. And they asked him, what are your views on Israel and what are your views on Hamas and Palestine? Because he's openly said from the very beginning it's a genocide. And he's been saying it since 1970s, 80s, because he has been through Holocaust. So he says that he sees parallels, very big parallels. But yeah, he was considered a security threat, so he was detained for like so many hours. But he's 95 years old, so I'm not sure how he is a terror threat. I can understand a security threat through his books and writings, and he's a very powerful intellectual in America. Everybody knows him who hangs around in academia and all these circles, so he's very powerful. So if they can do it to that person, they can do it to anybody, I guess. So detainment, like you were saying, that
Galloway said the same thing.
Yeah.
George Galloway in the UK said the same thing. He's
and
been
his
elected
wife.
to Parliament several times, and he was detained but not arrested. Now, as a former police officer, I would say that's impossible.
Yeah.
You cannot hold someone until you arrest them. If he tried to get up and walk out, they couldn't physically stop him unless they said, "Okay, you're under arrest." You have nothing. You then go on to the judge's rules, cautions. Everything you say may be taken down in evidence. But you can't stop somebody as a police officer unless you arrest them. Now, what's happened is that the government has given the police these special powers that allow them to do things that the Magna Carta, which is a nearly 1,000-year-old document, says you can't do. This is a document that has stood the test of time. It was signed, I think, in 1215 and it was the right of habeas corpus. It gave you human rights. These are the fundaments of the right, the innocence until proven guilty, the power of the authorities and the police. The police didn't even exist back then. But this Magna Carta is a Bill of Rights for humanity and has been the fundaments of all the way that policing has developed until now, until this generation. It has really changed. I left the police in 1987, so I'm really out of touch with it now. But when I was a police officer, if I stopped someone and they said, no, I'm not prepared to talk to you, I had to arrest them if I had suspicion. But I needed to have suspicion. You need to know your powers of arrest. If you don't know your powers of arrest and you arrest someone incorrectly, then you're going to get sued. So you need to know your powers of arrest. Why have I stopped this person? Why have I detained this person? What's my reasoning? What am I suspecting here? Has a crime just taken place? Is a crime just about to take place? These are all different facets that you need to take into account when you're talking to a member of the public as a police officer. And if they say, well, I haven't done anything wrong and I'm leaving, bye-bye. If they haven't done anything wrong and you can't prove that you had a good reason to suspect they had, or they might have been about to, or it was just happening and they could be responsible for it, if you didn't have that reasoning, you let them go. You couldn't stop them. If they said, I'm not giving you my name and address, you didn't have a choice. You could kind of encourage them, you could influence them, you could coerce them, you could even empower yourself a little bit more than you kind of had the right to. But the bottom line is, if they say I'm off, they're off. Now, George Galloway was arrested. He says he wasn't arrested, he was just detained. How can that be? That goes against the very fundaments of British law. And America basically has the same law as Britain in terms of human rights, not in terms of how they administer it with guns and enforcements like they have. But that's a different story as well. You can't just stop people at the border and then say, you're not arrested. Well, you are arresting me. It's as simple as that. That's the way it is. And I'm going unless you do arrest me. And then if they do arrest you, they probably then have to justify that in a court later on. So I believe George Galloway is now he's left the UK. He's not living in the UK right now. I don't blame him for that. I don't know where he's living, but he's not living in the UK.
Yeah, I think this is why I don't really understand. I mean, there's always an illusion of freedom and free speech. There has never been free speech in America or in UK. Also, I don't really understand why people trust politicians, because they are paid for by the lobbies and other corporations. And let's say in the case of America, Israel has a very big influence on their politics. In UK, I'm not sure which corporation has the biggest influence, but politicians are always paid for by lobbyists. That's how they raise funds. So they will look after those people so they can raise funds for the next time as well. So I'm not sure why still in 2025 people believe in politicians and all these kind of things. Yeah.
Well, is there a person out there in the audience and watching this show now, is there a person who can honestly look at their local politician and say, yes, I trust this person? I would say, depending on where you live, you might be living in a place that you have what you believe is an honest politician, and that's fantastic. But then do you trust that person's party? And this is a big, big question, because you may trust your local politician that you knew and elected because of either their reputation, their experience, or the successes that they'd had in the community. You elected that person. But 9 times out of 10, in the UK anyway, the person who represents them doesn't come from the community. They're parachuted into what they call the safe seat. When you get that situation, you've got a guy in Bradford who's never ever been to Bradford in his life, and all of a sudden that person who lives in Surrey is representing a bunch of Northerners. It doesn't work for me, and I mean, I'd like to see from the comments how many people actually trust their own politician, and why. Why would you trust the politician? Now, because they've proven to you that they're worthy of your trust. But generally speaking, I would say the answer is no. Very few people trust politicians. Very few people trust media. And my question to them is because I'm China-based and I'm China-focused, my question to them is always, why do you believe them about China? Because if I know China, and I don't believe them because I live in China, I know the truth about China. Of course, it's not a perfect state. It's got its problems, but generally speaking, this is a much safer, much freer, believe it or not, much less authoritarian and much less of a police state than the two other countries that I've lived for extended times and about 50 countries that I've visited. But the two countries that I've lived in, UK and Australia, both have far more serious laws, and did when I lived there, than China does today to manage people. I've always said this: China manages our behavior. The Western governments profit from our misbehavior.
That's so very true. I mean, even in Australia recently, Chris Hedges, he's a Pulitzer-winning journalist. He's very good, well respected. He was supposed to give a talk in Melbourne, and I was supposed to go and see him. So his event got cancelled because somehow they got to know that he has written about the genocide, and he's taking position with the United Nations against genocide. So they cancelled the event, and they invited a former IDF person to talk on his behalf. But yeah, that was a complete farce. So I mean, and that's
when
yeah.
When did we get to this stage where you encapsulated something that is completely wrong here? You're right, 100% right, but it is completely wrong. Chris Hedges has stood with the majority of the United Nations, and he stood with the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, and he agrees that there is a plausible genocide. Now, it's very dangerous to say there is a genocide. There is a plausible case to answer for a genocide. There's no question about that. A plausible case to answer. Let's leave it at that. And he agrees with that. And then you have people saying, well, we can't have this person speaking in Australia because he might convince the people that this is true. That's a frightening thought. When the globe, the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court all say the same thing, why is his opinion so dangerous to the Melbourne Town Hall? That's a scary thought.
Yeah, and the funny thing was the event was being organized by Australian Press for Freedom or something like that, Australian Freedom Press, which is why people found it really, really hilarious that they would cancel him but invite. I think the person who got invited has served in IDF, because everybody from Australia can serve in IDF, so there's no checks on that. Because
you don't have to be Jewish?
I mean, obviously he was Jewish, yeah. Okay. But I've seen people from India, from Nepal, from other countries, from America, who are not Jewish, go and serve in IDF, because IDF needs forces, army. Yeah, one funny thing I found out a couple of days ago, there were IDF military members in Ukraine fighting Russians, and one of the Russian generals or commanders said that they've never seen anybody fight like IDF people. They were just hiding behind Ukrainian people. So it appeared to me that they haven't had been in a real combat, one-to-one situation. And so I think they pinpointed 11 IDF members. I think they didn't capture them, but they ran away. So I've never seen anybody fight like IDF. So meaning they are not very good at, on one-on-one fighting, I guess. They may be very good at destruction. Yeah.
Destroying towns, villages, and when you have massive firepower, America's exactly the same. They have massive firepower, and they go into a country like Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, and they're literally fighting peasants with guns, and basically that's the situation. They have never had a fight with a peer competitor since the Second World War, and that was Japan. And they industrialized, they armed, they trained Japan. So they got themselves to blame. And we just had that rather interesting anniversary of the Pearl Harbor, and a lot of Japanese people saying the idea of that was to destroy colonialism and imperialism in Asia. Well, I'm sure the Asians are grateful for that.
Yeah, when they were bringing colonialism to China themselves, I guess.
It wasn't just China. It was, I think, 26 countries in Asia. And maybe that 26 counts Macau and Hong Kong as separate territories because they were colonies of different countries at that time. But so was Malaysia, Singapore. These were all colonies of somewhere else.
Yeah, that's true. So what's been happening with the Japanese Prime Minister now? She got a call from Trump, and then I take it things have subsided for now, I guess?
Yes and no. Certainly in terms of the media coverage, it's dropped off. But there are ships, many Chinese ships, conducting freedom of navigation exercises now in two different areas. One is around Japan. They have literally surrounded Japan in international waters and said, let's look what we can do. And they're doing the same thing currently to Australia again. Now, Australia say, well, why do they do this to us? Well, Australian ships, Australian planes are constantly buzzing around the Chinese waters. They're just outside of China's waters. They're going through the Taiwan Strait because the Taiwan Strait is a body of water that belongs to China. Doesn't matter whether or not you're on Taiwan or in the mainland, but there's not such thing as international waters. This is an area that belongs to China. It's the piece of land. It's 137 or 100, I think it's 137 kilometers from the mainland, and there's a lot of islands there as well. But from the mainland to the west coast of Taiwan is 137 kilometers. So ships can go up and down there. 1/3 of all global shipping goes through that very narrow channel. And so, Australia is sending planes up to keep an eye on it and ships through it. And so China is just saying, okay, well, if that's what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But what was really interesting is the fleet that they've sent down towards Australia this time is slightly larger and includes an aircraft carrier. Now, what's happening with this one is that this small fleet of ships that they've sent has actually more naval power than the entire Australian Navy. And this is just a tiny proportion of what China has. And I think they're trying to just say, we don't want a war, but look what's coming if you push us into one. China doesn't want a war. It never did. Nobody in their right mind wants a war, and China certainly is in its right mind. It does not want a war. It wants peaceful coexistence. It wants free trade. It wants fair trade. It wants everything to be the way it ought to be. If we were to look at the United Nations Charter, the World Trade Organization, all of the organizations that exist to make the world a better place, China supports them, and America doesn't. And so Australia now are getting a taste of their own medicine, and there is not a thing they can do about it. Richard Marles, the defense minister, is saying we're keeping an eye on it. Fair enough, keep an eye on it. Can't do anything about it. You can even shadow it. You can send ships out there if you have enough ships and people to man them. And that's Australia's problem right now. They don't have enough ships. They've got a very aging fleet of Collins-class submarines, which are mostly out of the water rather than in the water. They've got, I think, only 12 ships in their entire Navy that are operational, and they're not all operational at the same time. So they might only have 5 or 6 ships available to go out and do this. And if they send them all out there, everywhere else is uncovered. So they're not defending themselves. All they're doing is they're not doing anything other than watching to see what happens. And if China does what it did last time, live tests and live firing tests, then there'll be a big hullabaloo in the media, and that's it. Japan's getting the taste of their own medicine right now. They're getting shown what the military might of the People's Liberation Army Navy, PLAN, can provide. And I think it really, we all ought to look at this and go, okay, they're not threatening. They're just going out and doing exactly what other countries are doing to them. And it's not just America, Canada, Germany, Britain, Australia. They're all sending fleets to China. So China's saying, okay, we'll send a fleet out.
Yeah. So Australian Army is running ads on televisions, trying to recruit people now. Also,
they're going to the South. They're going to the South Pacific, to island nations, and recruiting from there as well.
Correct.
So I mean, they've done this before. I wonder if those people who join from Samoa or wherever get exactly the same pay terms and conditions as Australians get. That would be interesting
New
to see.
Zealanders
I
also,
bet they
so
don't.
there are many New Zealanders coming from New Zealand to work in Australia.
Yeah.
But that will give Australia justification to keep pushing for buying those nuclear submarines, which they will never get anyway, but they've already paid. So,
Yeah.
so that's not going to
And they'll
happen.
cost a lot of money.
Yeah, but Japan doesn't really have that much military might at this point. I'm not sure what they can do.
It has more than you think. They have the Japanese Defense Force, and they have upped their military spending from 1%. It's going up to 2.4% at the moment. Parliament has approved 2%, and then they've approved a couple of other special deals to build or do something, which will take it to 2.4%, and it's going higher. They want to go to the 5% that the Europeans have agreed for NATO. So Japan is now increasing its military capacity. It's actually exporting military hardware to Taiwan. And that's something that its constitution is supposed to forbid, but it's exporting military hardware to Taiwan right now. So I think Japan is probably more capable than we would imagine. The Japanese Defense Force is quite a big defense force, but it's designed to defend in the same way that the People's Liberation Army is designed to defend. And I think that what they're doing now is they're expanding their how do I describe this? They're not expanding their scope. They're just expanding their experience. They're going out into the blue waters of the ocean, in the white waters. They're a navy that tends to stay at home. But right now, they have two distinctly different operations, one going to Australia and one going to Japan, just to show they have the capabilities and the capacity to do it, I think.
Just on that one, I think we talked about this last time, but I think this is still very relevant. I'll share this screen. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah.
Logic says China will not attack, but leaders do not always operate on logic, and the region is a powder keg. So there's always the possibility of conflict breaking out. If that happens, my question is, what role do you see India playing there? Because India controls the entry to the Malacca Strait. India has an agreement with the U.S. to allow the aircraft to refuel at Indian bases. Do you think India will have a role, and will it support America militarily in a Taiwan conflict?
My sense is that if a conflict were to break out, it would not break out over Taiwan for the reasons that I just stipulated. I think the most dangerous area in East Asia is the South China Sea. And I would not be surprised if a conflict broke out between the Philippines and China and the United States got dragged in, which then goes to your question, what would India do? I think that India in that event would provide indirect support for the United States. I don't think that India would get involved in the fighting. I think if conflict broke out at a low level, the Americans would pretty much handle it by themselves, maybe with the Philippines as by their side in the fight.
So yeah. So I mean, again, I think like we discussed last time, I don't really understand why other countries are so keen to jump into wars. I guess they should be talking about peace and negotiation. But every time there's a...
Yeah, it is Palki. She's
I know, but I've seen a lot of her interviews. I mean, it keeps popping up in my YouTube algorithm. I'm not sure how. But she asked the same question to Penny Wong, which is the foreign minister of Australia. And that foreign minister was, again, diplomatic like Professor John Mersheimer was. But the intent was that how can India help? Stuff like that. Why are different countries so keen to help in war? I've never understood that. I mean, they don't really have enough resources. Their GDP per capita is $2,700, which is really low. Their poverty level is on par with African poverty level, and they are so keen to wage war. I've never understood that mentality.
They're not. The Indian government are not. What you have there is an Indian media hostess. She is extremely anti-China. She's a hawk. She's a sensationalist, and she's doing this for clicks. That we really need to separate the sensationalism from the realities. John Mersheimer is a realist. I agree with almost everything he ever says, but he's as dumb as a hat full of rocks on China. He really does not understand China at all.
Yeah,
now,
just
he
before,
understands America.
just sorry. Yeah, I'll show you another video next time.
Sure.
John Mersheimer talking about China, which is why I didn't understand why his attitude toward or policies or his thinking towards China, I think, is sort of flawed in my opinion as well.
Well, he's the way he views China is through an American lens, and a lot of people do this. They make this mistake. What would America do faced with these conditions? Whatever the conditions are, what would America do? And we can pretty much predict what America would do. Now, to transfer that to China is completely wrong. You cannot predict what China will do in the same set of circumstances. Now, of course, they're never going to be the same set of circumstances. But this is a thing that even Mersheimer can't get. But he is right. He doesn't see Taiwan as being the major conflict in Asia right now. And I agree with that. I disagree with him that Philippines are going to go to war. Philippines would be destroyed in a second. And it would just destroy them. They cannot compete with China. I mean, that's not a bluster or bluff on my part. That's an actual given. The Philippines are an impoverished nation that are being propped up militarily by America. So if the Philippines go to war, America must join in that war to protect them, and we know they won't. So I don't think that's going to happen. We're going to get very close. We're going to have edging up to the point. It's brinkmanship, it's one-upmanship, and China is really, really being restrained in the South China Sea right now. It could do a lot more than it's actually doing. So it doesn't. It chooses not to. It could do the same thing. It has enough ships that it can do what it's doing to Australia and Japan right now to the Philippines. It has enough ships. But what's it going to do if it does that? It sends half of its ships away, and then it loses its defense of its nation. So it's not likely to do that. What China is doing is completely different to what John Mersheimer thinks China will do. The reason Palki suggests this is because she is sensationalist. She's a journalist who, she's widely informed and she's got great opinions on certain things, but she's completely, totally, and absolutely berserk about China and the threat from China. And really what she's doing, is just pandering to her own audience. And she's good at that. She gets the clicks. She's the Fox News of India. She's the Sky News of India. That's all she is. The drilling has started in my building. I'm sorry about that, if you get to hear that. She's just doing this for clicks. So we've got to separate the reality of government policy. What is India's policy towards this? And the reality is that it's got nothing at all to do with them. They're not going to get involved in either Taiwan or the Philippines. But if there is a wider conflict, then yes, they do control certain sea routes. They do control certain aspects of different things. They might take a blockade of the Gwadar port and stuff like that. They might go down to the Malacca Straits, and they certainly have the capacity to do that, and they've designed their navy around doing that. But they're really not going to get involved because Palki and the media says we should, and they're not going to get involved because one or two extreme politicians thinks we should, and certainly not because American paid or supported politicians or media think they should. And that's the issue that we need to really keep into context here. UK policy is deal with China as a challenge, but deal with China. US policy is deal with China as a challenge, but deal with China. Australian policy, exactly the same. They all say China's a challenge, but we have no choice but to deal with them. Media and extremist politicians will come out with all kinds of things, and we look at this and we say, well, this must be America's policy. It's not. America's policy is to deal with China as a threat, as a challenge, but deal with them. We have no choice but to deal with them until such time as America, Australia, and every other country in the world can decouple from China they must deal with China. China's got the upper hand on all of this. And it doesn't matter what media says, and it really doesn't matter what a few extremist politicians and media hosts think, say, or even threaten them. Palki is quite good at saying this is what's going to happen when it's not going to happen at all. John Mersheimer is the same. This is what's going to happen. And quite often he's right, but not on China.
Yeah, no, I respect Professor John Mersheimer, but sometimes I feel that his views on China, like you mentioned, he views China through an American lens, what America would do if put in that situation. So, but didn't China had a radar lock on some Japanese fighter jets recently? I heard
Yes,
that.
they did.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened or what were for Japanese fighter
Well,
jets
it
doing.
happened because in international waters right now, China has got some military out there. It's got an aircraft carrier, and planes were taking off and landing from this aircraft carrier. And I believe there were 2 Japanese Defense Force flights went close to this carrier, closer than they should have done. And so these planes locked on them on the radar. They call it painting. They locked them on. And they basically what that means is once you're locked on, you're destroyed. If they just press that button and then let something go, I don't know what weaponry they're carrying, but if they're locked on, that means that the lock-on is for a missile. The missile has got them, and it will destroy them. Now, interestingly enough, it doesn't say whatever happened, whether the Japanese were able to get out of being locked on, whether they were able to turn it around and lock onto the Chinese. I think the fact is, Chinese just showed air superiority, and they showed it peacefully in a threatening way. There's no question it was a threat. You lock someone on, I mean, that pilot must have pissed his pants or shat his pants. I mean, but it would be the most frightening thing to be, you're in a, I don't know what flight, F-35 or whatever it is that you're in, and you think you have the best technology in the world. You have great confidence in your own ability because you are a fighter pilot, and they're all cocksure. Of course, they've got a degree of arrogance because they are the best in the world. I don't think there's any question about that. Anyone who's a fighter pilot in any Air Force or Navy, these are the cream of the crop in terms of flying. And then all of a sudden, bang, you are pinged. That must be a frightening experience for a pilot. I would think that's a horrifying experience for a pilot, because once you're locked, you're locked. And all they need to do now is press the button and you're destroyed. So that's quite threatening. That's really threatening. And China did that, I believe, to 2 Japanese Air Force planes or Japanese Defense Force planes. So that's a bit of a worry for them.
Yeah, but why would Japan want to fight China or Taiwan? Because, I mean, so Taiwan, they say, is an independent country, but Okinawa used to be an independent country as well.
Yeah.
And I was reading up on the history of Okinawa. So Japanese were very clever. They put all the Americans in Okinawa so they could pillage and do all the bad stuff to Okinawans, not to main Japan, sorry. Japanese are very clever. So there's a case for Okinawa's freedom as well. I mean, if they think that Taiwan should
China
be free.
China has just reopened this question, and I think we're going to see a lot more of this, a lot more. We're going to start seeing China doing to Okinawa, Ryukyu, much more, or as much as America are doing to Taiwan. Taiwan is not a country, it's a province of China. Okinawa is the Japanese name for this group of islands that they colonized a long time ago. Now, according to the Potsdam Declaration and the Cairo Declaration, those islands belong not to Japan, but to the Ryukyuans, the people who live there. Now, those people who live there are colonized twice. They're double colonized. They are a colony of Japan that is occupied by America. And there's 50,000 troops there. They've got a lot of planes. They may very well have nuclear bombs, which goes against the constitution of Japan. But Australia is the same. They have this don't ask, don't know policy. So if a ship comes into an Australian dock or a Japanese dock and it's carrying nuclear bombs, nobody says a word about it. It's against the constitution, and it's certainly against Australia's. I don't know if Australia has a constitution. Yeah, it does. It does have a constitution. So it's against Australia's nature and peaceful nature in theory that they have any nuclear weapons. But they've got B-52s landing in Australia. They've got submarines, which are stealth submarines carrying probably nuclear weapons. The policy is don't ask. And so they're now, China has recently, and I'm talking about very recent, last few days, reopened the question about Okinawa, Ryukyu, and whether or not it really belongs to Japan or should belong to Japan. It's currently an occupied territory of the United States and a colony of Japan. That's the situation right now.
But I've seen people from Okinawa protesting against those military bases. So there are 60,000 American troops there, and they are opening new bases. And I saw recently, a week ago, people were protesting opening up new bases because apparently there are a lot of reports of Japanese, American army, I think, sexually assaulting Okinawan girls, and not just adults, school girls as well. And nothing's been done for that. About that. So so I think their concerns are probably not heard. So I mean, if I was America, I would say there's a case for regime change in Japan.
Yes,
we should need to do something CIA Mossad style.
If you're American, yeah. There is one lady who has started an organization in Okinawa, and she keeps a record of all of the recorded assaults, crimes, not just assaults, but crimes committed by Americans. And she's got a bigger record than the police have. And people trust her to give her information, which they're not trusting the police. There is no point in going to the police in Okinawa if you are raped, because by the time your report has been dealt with, then the officer, the personnel, the military personnel involved in that will have been moved, gone. They don't stand trial in Japan. The last person who stood trial in Japan that I'm aware of, there might have been others, but I'm aware of a guy who killed someone in an accident, a car accident, and went to prison for that, but then a couple of years later was repatriated back to the United States and is not serving the sentence that the court gave to that person. The military law, they say military law transcends local laws. Okay, so if military law does transcend local law, what actually happens to the people guilty of rape? When a girl reports a rape, then you should have an investigation, you should have a trial, and you should have a conviction if a rape actually took place. But what's happening here is they're just whisking them away and transferring them somewhere else. Or they may even kick them out of the military. Wow, what a terrible punishment to get kicked out of the military. I mean, it's a badge of honor for a lot of Americans. I got kicked out of the military. But yeah, these are known rapists, and they're back in society in America. America seems quite happy about that. If it was me, I'd be wanting to put them on trial, get them locked away, get them out of society. But America seems to be quite okay. You do something wrong in a different country, we'll get you back to America. Don't worry about it. I don't know if it's as simple as that, and I'm sure that inside of the military, they are subject to some disciplinary issues. They're probably put in handcuffs. They're probably carried back very uncomfortably on some kind of transportation flight rather than a proper flight where you sit in proper chairs and have movies and snacks. But the bottom line is they're not being punished for the crimes they are committing. That's a fact. And there is a permanent vigil outside of the bases in the Okinawa colony, because Okinawa is not its correct name. That's the Japanese name for it. But there are permanent vigil outside of each of these bases. Every military personnel coming in or going out must go past a protest. They see the protest. They know they're not wanted there. Now, they would say, it's only a small number of people. But this is a 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, rotating people. There's a lot of people who do not want the Americans there. I would say it has to be very, very high. Probably, there'd be traders and retailers, and the people who make money are probably okay, but they have to make money. And if you remove, like the Philippines a few years ago when Mount Pinatubo blew up, the Philippines just literally the Americans just literally abandoned the Philippines and said, you need to clear this up yourself. It's not our problem. And they got out. And they left behind tens of thousands of illegitimate babies. They left behind poverty. They left behind a load of stuff that people made their living because the Americans were there. All of a sudden, that's gone. And that's a big, big problem when that kind of money goes out of the economy. So, yeah, there are people who'd say, yeah, we have to tolerate them because it's good for our economy. But the economy will correct itself. But they'll go through some pain when that happens. Individual retailers, traders, the brothels will be really busy there for sure. Those places will go out of business. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? There's a lot of social issues involved in that kind of question, but the fact is, there is some economic benefits to having the military there, but do they outweigh the social benefits and the defense benefits? Personally, I'd say no.
It's the same thing they did in Afghanistan as well, sexual assault of girls, but hardly any convictions. So, which is why people were really, really angry. And for that culture to suffer all that humiliation, it's a really big thing. But I think, you mentioned something about Americans. My feeling living outside of America is that Americans are okay with this type of behavior. I mean, if I talk about the latest Epstein scandal, they seem to be okay with them assaulting underage girls. People frown upon it, but I don't think there's much accountability over there. And I'm not sure how the society lives with itself with that behavior, but it's not just certain individuals, it's most of the politicians, finance managers, Larry Summers as well, and academia. In academia also, many people are involved in this kind of thing, and they seem to be okay with all of that, which is why we haven't seen any names coming out. But so
I'm not sure that ordinary people are okay with it. I think
they're not doing anything over there. Okay. So I mean, and they elected the government.
What can they do? But the government are okay with it, and the media are okay with it because this suits their purpose. The people, I'm not so sure they are. American people, for the most part, I only meet Americans here in China or a couple in Australia in the past. Every American I've met, a fairly nice guy, a nice person. They're all reasonable people. They all understand that America is not widely respected or liked. These are people who've come out of America. So I can't talk for people in America. But I think the people that I know who are Americans, particularly here in China, they're quite aghast at what their country is doing and has done. And they're certainly shocked at what individuals seem to be capable of. So they want, everyone I know who's American wants to see the Epstein thing resolved one way or another. Now, the problem with this Epstein thing is it's a house of cards. You're going to start at the top or start at the bottom. The house is going to fall down. And that is how big Epstein is. Their military issues, this is how big their military problems are. They have so much massive corruption, so much bloating of military contracts. Someone made the comment that a bag of screws, they held up a bag of screws in a Senate committee hearing and said, why does this bag of screws cost $900 or $9,000? And there's a guy on Taobao here said, I've got the same screws for 12 RMB. And literally does have the same screws for 12 RMB. They may be made out of a different material, but they'll do the same job. That kind of thing. So they seem to be, this is government, it's not society. I think society, from the Americans that I know, who admittedly have all left America, but the Americans that I know all feel the same way. Now, some of them say, I have problems with my brother, my sister, my cousin, my auntie, whatever, because they're MAGA or because of this or that. And you've got that. I've got that in my own family. I have problems with my brothers who don't speak to me because I'm pro-China. And everything they read about China says it's bad. So I must be the brainwashed one. That's the issue that we have. They have a certain degree of trust in their government that it can't be as bad as it really is, except that it is. But I think most people are ordinary people are probably quite aghast at what's going on inside their government and what they're allowed to get away with. But how do you vote that person out when your policies or your politics lean towards this way or that way? You have two choices effectively. Now, locally, you might get more choices, but you only have two choices. You're going to have this president or that president. Take it or leave it. And that's why so many people don't bother voting. Now, if there was a true democracy, you'd say, well, if only 40% of the people voted, then it's not a valid vote. You should cancel that vote and have another one. But then how many billions would that cost to do that? There's the problem. The cost of doing proper governance is just outrageous. In China, there's cost involved, yeah, but elections, there is no donations. There is no political lobbying. If you want to vote for someone, what you do is you go to the local notice board and you read who your candidates are. You may know them personally because they're all locally elected, but you read who your candidates are and you go, yeah, I think that guy's good. I'll vote for that person, that guy or that girl, that lady, because they on the notice board, it says what this person has done. You don't get voted on what you're going to do. You get voted in on what you've done. And the military is the same. You know, in the West, particularly in America, but I actually did serve for a very short period of time in the British Army. And it was a very short period of time. And I can tell you, I come from a working class background. I grew up in a town that was basically mining or fishing. That's what you did when you were in that town if you left school. I moved away from that when I was about 13 to live in suburbia near London, and my life went in a different direction. When I joined the army, I was the best educated. I was the kind of best brought up. I had the best, most middle class background. All the rest were, these people had come from the dregs of society. They'd come out of poverty, some of them. You know, one guy in my room, it was the first time he'd ever had a bed for himself. He'd never slept in his own bed in his life. And this is what the military takes in. Now, in China, if you want to join the military, you can't get into the military unless you are already physically fit. You already have a really good school record. You have done everything that the society expected of you. You have no criminal record. You can't get into the military. You can't even get in if you've got a tattoo into the Chinese military. You cannot get a tattoo while you're in the military. So, you see someone with a tattoo in China, they're not serving officers. They're not going to be serving officers or serving personnel in the military. They are very, very strict. You join the military in China to help the Chinese people. You join the military in America to help yourself. You're coming from a background. Now, it doesn't mean all poor people are bad people. There's no question about that. But you're coming from a background of usually poverty, possibly crime. A lot of the judges will say, I'll give you a choice. You go into prison or you can join the army. Oh, I'll join the army, thanks. So they go and join the army. Now, that's not to say there's not good people in the army. I'm sure there are. But there are very bad people in the Western militaries too. Now, these people are going to be bad people whether they're in the army or not in the army. But you get them into the army, that's what you get. And they will go into a squad. They'll go into a regiment. They'll go into a platoon or they'll, whatever part of the army they're in, there's a danger of them infecting others with their own values. And then they're taught to hate. The Chinese army are taught to love the country. American army are taught to hate the other countries. It's very different perspective. Of course, love America, and you swear allegiance to the flag and the president and all that sort of stuff. But, the bottom line is, in China, you're swearing allegiance to the people. The People's Republic of China is run by the people, for the people. And the People's Liberation Army is from the people, to serve the people. There's a very big difference in the culture and the perception of the person who joins it. You can't join the army if you're a criminal. Simple as that. You can't even join the army if you have a tattoo.
Yeah. The reason I say it is much more widely accepted in American society is because even before it became public what he and that entire ring around him was doing, even at a very low level, people knew about it. District attorney General knew about it. People in FBI, people in CIA knew about it. It's not just the government, it's the institutions that are involved as well. So they were running it as an organized scheme, and that's the impression I get when I look at some of the things that come out in media. And now with the latest reveal of these emails, it's very evident which way they were leaning, I guess, trying to influence opinion and trying to see if they can do that by offering, by talking about things like that with their inner circle. So that's why I think it's much more widely accepted. Just an illusion that they don't like it or they frown upon it, I guess. Like you mentioned, it's a house of cards. Everybody's involved. What do you do?
Yeah. I spent a lot of time thinking that this kind of conspiracy theory that Israel is responsible for all of this, I had a lot of kind of doubts about that. And then you start to think, well, Epstein is a Jewish name. Okay, that doesn't mean he's involved with Israel. But then you find out that Benjamin Netanyahu and he were very close friends. And then you look at Ghislaine Maxwell, whose father is now proven to have been a Mossad agent and basically a media baron. And when you start looking at these, the influence is really there, and it's quite frightening. The influences and the connections leading to the conspiracy theory that Israel was controlling this, and now Israel has the dirt on all of these people. I'd love somebody now to go down to Epstein Island and actually take the house apart and look for recording devices, CCTVs, audio, video, all of this sort of stuff. This is James Bond level of fiction in real life. It's really quite frightening. And I don't know if anyone's ever done that. What has actually happened to the buildings on Epstein's Island? I think it's not one island, it's more than one as well. But what's happened to the places where all these people went? Who's got them now? And what's in them? Nobody ever talks about that. It wouldn't be that hard to go down there and find out. Is every room bugged? Has every single room got a camera in it? And so whatever was going on is now recorded? It's a frightening thought, isn't it? Who holds the record?
Yeah, it is. And also when you go further back, Ehud Barak was his friend. They stayed together as well. And so I say there's much more stronger evidence of him being involved with the Israeli government or with Mossad than there is an evidence for Iran building a nuclear bomb. But you can bomb a country on that flimsy evidence, but you've got a mountain of evidence, videos, all that kind of stuff, and you still can't bring people to justice. So there you go. That's why I say it's all coordinated. It's accepted, I guess.
Iran doesn't have a nuclear bomb, but it is only weeks away.
Yeah, it's been weeks away since 1986 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
I remember years,
they always
years
say,
ago.
Any day now, any day we're going to build a bomb.
Yeah, I was involved with the Iranian embassy siege in London. I was there at the Iranian embassy siege when the SAS stormed in through the buildings. I was actually involved in that. And, my kind of irrational fear, rational at the time, my fear of Iran was quite a serious thing, but it was completely irrational when I look back on it and what I was told and what I was led to believe and how different that is to the reality. Iran is a country I would very much like to visit and see for myself. Afghanistan too. And I think I'd like to go and see both of those in the next year or two before I get too old and before I start to lose my abilities. I'm 67 now, so before I'm 70, I hope to have seen both of those two countries and do some reporting back from them.
Yeah, that will be good. I think Iran has one of the highest literacy rates when it comes to women. The first ever field medalist is probably the highest award you can give to a mathematician, was a female, first ever female field medalist was an Iranian. She sadly died when she was around 40. So they're very smart people over there. There's a reason why there was a Persian Empire, I guess. So, yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you touched upon,
my father lived in Persia for many years. I believe I might have even been conceived in Persia. My mother went to live there. My oldest brother lived there for a little while as a baby child. My father was in a place called Abadan. He was in the oil industry, and British Petroleum, BP, were running that. So he had his own opinions on Iran too, which conflicted with mine. At the time, I was a police officer, and then agreed with mine, or mine agreed with his when I was older. Yeah.
Yeah. You touched upon British Army, so I think we talked about last time as well. I heard somewhere that some of the fighter jets that British Army uses are owned by private equity, and then they loan it to British Army when British Army pays them. Is that normal?
Yeah, they lease it. Yeah.
Okay, is that normal for armies to
I
do
don't
that?
think it's normal. No, asset management is normal. Asset management is quite normal. I was in one of my periods of time in Australia. I worked in what we called major systems, and the idea of major systems was I'd be responsible for designing and overseeing the installation of security systems, building management systems, closer CCTV access control, that kind of thing in large projects. And as a result of that, I got involved in asset management of military. The largest client that we had as a company was the Defense Science DSTO, Defense Science Technology Organization in South Australia, and we managed that site. So we had the security on the site, and it had facilities that we would manage for them. We managed the catering at one stage as well. So asset management is not unusual, and it does make sense. You don't want soldiers. If you've got a limited number of soldiers, you don't want them managing the quartermaster stores. In the past, that was always military personnel. Asset management meant that you could give that job, so you don't need a senior officer in charge of supplies when you can have a company that's a logistics company quite capable of doing this, and they do it for a fee, which is usually a lot cheaper than doing it yourself. That's the theory behind asset management. Of course, once you manage those assets, you can then start putting the prices up and changing the prices, and you have contract variations which allow you to make more money, and these kinds of things add and they bloat your costs. So yeah, asset management is quite common, but the management of weaponry is a very different thing. That should be controlled by the military. What we have in the UK is a very strange situation, and it was only exposed quite recently, where the planes that the Air Force use aren't owned by the military, or if they are owned, they're managed by a private company. And that private company had some very tenuous links outside of military as well. So you've got a situation where the military can say, oh, we need to use these 3 Phantom fighters, Phantom jets or something, and they say, you can't today. We're maintaining them or whatever. Every time they went up for training exercises, they had to pay the asset management company. So if they're going to be used in conflict, then the asset management company, which is also the insurance company, would say, no, we don't want to use this in a conflict. Or could. I don't know how the situation is contractually arranged, but it's a frightening thought that the military don't control their own armaments, particularly in this. Who owns the ships? I don't know the answer to that. Who owns the jets? We do know from this exposure in Western media that there is a company that owns, or at least owns the rights of use of the fighter planes. That's frightening.
Must be the private equities, something like Blackstone, BlackRock, these kind of private equities. But I mean,
it's not BlackRock.
Yeah, must be something like that. Private equities, they've got a lot of money. But then it adds 2 problems. One, you mentioned they can't use it on the day they want to use it. The second, it adds more frictional costs. You have to pay. There are more intermediaries involved, intermediate steps involved. So you have to pay more, and that money comes out of taxpayers' pocket, I guess. So I'm not sure.
Theoretically, you would do this as a business manager. So even the military has business managers. So as a business manager, theoretically, what you do is you would farm out certain aspects of your operation to save costs. I get that. That does make sense. So the Defense Science Technology Organization had a security around the perimeter. It's a secure military compound, and 20 soldiers were around that compound just being security officers. So I worked for a security company, and we won the contract. That's how we got into this. We won the contract to police the gates of the DSTO, to manage the fence line of it, and just the perimeter security. And from there, we contract varied into different aspects of management. But that's a very, very expensive process. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you've got 5 or 6 military personnel on duty. So if you've got them 24 hours a day, you need 3 shifts. Then you've got them 7 days a week, so you need 4 reliefs. So you work it like this. How many people do we need to provide 5 people on this job? And we need about 30 of them. And then you need casuals who can step in, who've been trained to do this. Now, when you're talking about military personnel, there's 30 soldiers who are not being soldiers. They're being security guards. So it makes sense to outsource that. It makes sense in a military capacity, because now you've got trained soldiers who are able to do what they're supposed to do, defend the country, rather than just stand on a gate and check the manifests of the vehicles coming in and going out. So that does make sense. And really, security guards probably a lot less well trained and a lot less expensive than a soldier. So a soldier gets trained to do a job, and it's not being on the front gate of a factory. A security guard gets trained to do that job, and they can do it effectively. They don't have to have a high degree of intelligence to be very, very good at their job. That's not to say they're all stupid. I was one once, a long, long time ago. And of course, we're not all stupid. There's some very smart people. They choose to do a job like this because they want to do something else. I actually studied, I did a year 12 education whilst I was a security guard. Online, not online, I did it by correspondence course. In Australia, you could join the School of the Air by correspondence. So I was lucky because I had to drive past the office rather than have to wait for letters to arrive and be sent back. I would drop stuff off, pick stuff up. And while I was working as a security guard, I educated myself to a standard that was acceptable to Australian government, because I wanted to join the police in Australia. So I had to prove my education standards, so I did. I didn't join the police in Australia, but that's a different story. That's what a lot of security guards do. That they're doing something different. So they're not all thick. They're not all stupid. They're not all people who say, "Hey, you can't park there." That's not the security guard that I know. There's a lot of very smart people doing that job, but they don't have to be highly trained, skilled, either mechanics or artillery people. You get trained to do a job in the army, and that's what you should be doing, not standing outside the gate of effectively a laboratory or science. You don't stand outside of the gate of a factory when you're trained to be an artillery gunner. So simple as that. So security needs to be outsourced. And I believe this, I've heard this as well. Buckingham Palace has soldiers. They change the guards every day, in the summer every day, in the winter every second day. I believe that not all of them are full-time soldiers anymore. They used to be, and the same in Windsor Castle. The guards that you see in military uniform are not all soldiers. Some of them are security guards pretending to be soldiers, and it saves costs. It improves the ability to fight because soldiers are doing soldiering instead of security guards. So that does make sense. Outsourcing maintenance makes sense. If you want to have a certain number of people in your Air Force, then mechanics can be non-Air Force personnel. That does make sense. For ownership of your arms, I think that's, who owns the tanks? Who owns the guns? Who owns the ships? Who owns the planes? This is a bit of a worry for me. I don't know the answer to it, but it would be a worry and I do know for a fact now that some of the planes in the United Kingdom are not owned by the Air Force. That's frightening.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not sure who United Kingdom is going to fight against. I guess no one in its immediate neighborhood wants to attack United Kingdom.
Been at war with France for about 1,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah. But Just one last thing on Nexperia. Do you see any further development happening? Because we went like, okay, we're gonna seize it. Okay, Trump says something. Okay, unseized, and then back again, I guess.
Yeah, the thing that I see happening in with Nexperia is the Dutch minister who did it will have to resign. I mean, I think he'll have to. I can't see how he can get away with this complete misstep. This is not something that could happen. It should happen at that level. The CEO of Nexperia is still not back in charge of the company that he's in charge of, and consequently, the idea that this is going to be very easily resolved is not the case at the moment. I believe that China has released enough chips to satisfy the immediate needs, and that means that the dialogue can keep going. But there is going to come a time when China, not China as a country, but Nexperia as a company, Wingtree, the company that owns it, did the right thing. They just said, well, look, if you're going to take away one arm of our company, the parent of our company, effectively, the place that did all the work, then made all these chips and sent all these chips to China for testing and distribution, then we're not going to send them back to you. And that's really what China did. When, we've got billions of chips, and it is billions, and every car has hundreds of these things in them. They're low-level, what they call legacy chips, and they're not AI chips. They're things that control your windscreen washers, your windscreen wipers, and your door locking. These are the things that you need to. Single pole, double throw relays used to be the thing in the old day, but these are things that control all the little micro motors that your car has. I think we have an internet connection problem at the moment.